Hey everybody, it's Love Prevails. Say hi, Love Prevails.
Hi, Love.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, it's us.
The massive millions of people are listening to this broadcast.
Yes. Thank you. Live from Pacifica. From NPR. So there are 6 of us on this episode, I guess, and we've got a new question. So let's just go around and say hi. I'm Will Green in Andover, Massachusetts. I'm Will. Julie, you want to say hi next, then pass it to someone?
Julie Todd from Lawrence, Massachusetts. Wesley.
Wesley White from near La Crosse, Wisconsin. Brenda.
Brenda Smith-White from near La Crosse, Wisconsin, with Wesley, actually.
Laura, you want to go next?
I'm Laura. I'm in Denver, Colorado.
I'm Amy DeLong in River Falls, Wisconsin.
Awesome. So this is the second time we've done this, having a conversation together around a question that we've been thinking about. And the question this time, and again, this is posted on our website and social media and this sort of thing, is do we, for you listening or for anyone else, do we really value unity in the United Methodist Church? Unity is the word, it's the thing, and gets talked about all the time. About how, just this assumption or the statement that we all value unity and love unity. So we thought it'd be cool to think about and talk about together and have other people think about, do we value unity? What is, and the second part of that, maybe I doubt it will be a yes or a no, but maybe it will be after do we value unity, is what other values could we lift up other than unity? What values does Love Prevails celebrate, or what are we trying to embody? What drive us, or as individuals? If unity is not where it's at, then what is? Is there some other concept, some other word, some other idea, some other principle or value that we, want to celebrate or want to work towards or try to claim? So that's what we're going to talk about for a little bit together. Starting off with, what do we think of unity? Is this something that that we're for, or something that we support, so to speak?
This is Wesley. Part of the concern that I have about the unity language is the context in which it's currently being used in the United Methodist Church, which means it's a construct that the bishops have put together to avoid talking about human sexuality, which has been the issue for 50 years. And so that was what we were supposed to be dealing with since the 2016 General Conference. How are we going to find a way to live together around that particular issue? And all of a sudden the bishops chime in with unity. So I think for me, it's a little hard to talk about unity as a general theory without understanding this particular context, which means that for me right now, unity has become an idol of the church as opposed to something that we can really find a way to talk about. We can't talk about the wall because the language is not there to talk about it. You've got supporters and detractors, period. It's a binary on-off kind of thing, and unity feels to me like it's gotten out of hand. So I don't know how we can talk about it without something else.
Yeah, Wesley, that's exactly where I'm coming from too, kind of at the beginning. It's like, unity, I know what that means, the United Methodist Church. It's one of these things where there are 2 definitions of the word. There's like a dictionary definition of unity, and then there's how the word is deployed, how it gets used, and, what it means within this context, as you say. We can't, when we talk about unity, we're talking about a bait and switch. The point is, it's not that we're talking about unity or celebrating this ideal. It's that we're not going to talk about queer people. We're not going to talk about justice. We're not going to talk about homophobia. We're not going to talk about the issues that the church has and the way the church oppresses people. Instead, we're going to talk about this fake thing. Unity, as I did get thinking about this, unity yeah, in another context, sure, unity is certainly something worth thinking about and worth working towards and worth celebrating. And I can think of lots of examples in my life, in my faith life, in my political life, in my community, where unity is so important, but it doesn't happen in the United Methodist Church. One of the phrases that I keep coming back to, and I've been saying this for a long time, is their unity does not include us. The unity, when they say unity, does not include us. I mean, as queer people, when the Council of Bishops talks about unity, they're saying, they're trying to close ranks and prevent conversation, prevent interaction, prevent opportunities for the Spirit to break through. It's a defensive posture. So,
Yeah,
that's where I am.
I put it in the category of code language for sure. When the word unity is used, it means we're not going to really talk about our differences. And, anybody who's done just kind of basic inclusiveness stuff knows that it's not right to say we're all the same. We just need to get along. We absolutely need to understand our differences and how those differences play out in people's real lives. And I see unity as that kind of like, let's just pretend that we're all the same and everything is fine. And until they understand the challenges and the struggles of queer people in the United Methodist Church, until our voice is front and center, there is no possibility for unity. I also think of unity, I see it kind of the way that the word covenant was used about 15 years ago. It just was a dirty word. It was a churchy word meant to shut us up and to say what you bring, what's your voice, what you have to say doesn't really matter because we're not looking at that. We're not gonna talk about that.
Right.
The other little thing I'll add right now is that while there are many, many differences between the United Methodist Church's treatment of LGBTQ people and the Catholic sex abuse scandal, I hear the bishops and archbishops in the Catholic Church talk, and I hear United Methodist bishops, and I hear people who are talking about unity in that sense of how do we hold the institution together. And the answer for the Catholic Church is we will hold the institution together even when what is being sacrificed are our children. And I hear that in the United Methodist Church too. We know that the United Methodist Church has had the opportunity to speak out against bullying and all kinds of stuff. But when it looks like they might accidentally also be protecting a queer kid, they refuse to do it. So while those issues are so very different and I don't want to conflate them, I also think this is how the institution acts when it wants to protect itself. And we're the sacrifice. And churches said we are willing to have that sacrifice, just like the Catholic Church has said we are willing to sacrifice our children to sex offenders.
Yeah, I think that's super on point. This is Julie. And I think in different kinds of ways we talked about that there's no analysis of context when we talk about unity. And I think everyone who's spoken so far is, there's no analysis of power there, right? There's no analysis of oppression there. When I was thinking about whether unity was a value for me or not, again, in some abstract way, I feel like, sure. But in this context of LGBTQ oppression in the United Methodist Church, it's not a value because we all know that unity is at the cost of, like you were just saying, LGBTQ lives. That justice for LGBTQ people, and we can talk about any number of justice and injustice issues in the United Methodist Church, will never have a value higher than unity. And that is backwards in my reading of the gospel. And so I think from a theological point of view, I was thinking about myself and how I'm so utterly a liberationist, like sort of trained in classical liberation theology, where, in my view, God takes sides.
Mm-hmm.
God takes sides with the oppressed. God takes sides with the poor. God takes sides with the people who are on the margins. I think that is a consistent witness of Scripture throughout the entire text, the Hebrew Bible, New Testament. I think that's a consistent witness. If there's a consistent witness in Scripture, it's that. And so I follow a God. I follow a Christ who takes sides.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think we're called to do. And that currently in this context calls for the dismantling of unity ideology. And it will still be left for us to know whether or not it calls for the dismantling of this denomination. And I think that has to be dealt with realistically. And I understand that the bishops are burdened with their call consecration to uphold the unity of the church. But I don't think that it's legitimate. I think to the extent that unity means maintaining the hierarchy that we have, the actual literal hierarchy that we have in place right now, and the people who maintain episcopal power, if that's what the unity of the church means, I'm not for it, because that authority is completely illegitimate. And that I say that because I have witnessed it firsthand, and there is not a lot of goodness there, and that's not to attack individuals at all. I was going back to some liberationist theologian texts that have been really important to me. And this question always comes back up for me. And this is from Jose Miguel Bonino. The question is not what degree of justice or liberation is compatible with the existing order, but what kind of order is compatible with the demands of justice and liberation. And so if the demands of justice and liberation for LGBTQ people is to dismantle the current order, then so be it. And I'm not trying to speak for all of us right now. I'm trying to speak on behalf of myself. And it doesn't mean that I hope that the church goes down the toilet per se, but I think that it's okay if it does in the pursuit of liberation and justice for all kinds of folks in this denomination. Because if the connection is what we're trying to argue for, the connection has done a hell of a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm.
And its financial benefits do not outweigh its costs.
Julie, can I back up to, you're talking about how we haven't done an analysis of oppression. Do you think there's a consensus on the Council of Bishops that LGBTQ people are an oppressed group?
No. I don't know exactly what you mean by consensus.
Well,
I think there's a majority of bishops who believe that the United Methodist Book of Discipline should change, something along the lines of the Simple Plan. I think that's a majority, but I don't think there's a consensus.
Yeah, what brings it up is a conversation I was having with a bishop one time at a Council of Bishops, and I could not get him to say that he believed that LGBTQ people are oppressed in the United Methodist Church.
Right.
That it is our choice to be here, and if we felt oppressed, we should leave. But let the system just makes rules, and whether and then so Catholics, sorry, let a woman in the Catholic Church is not oppressed because she can't be a priest. She has a choice to just not be Catholic. And he said, I just never see that as the oppression of women. And I said, well, do you see queer people oppressed in the United Methodist Church? And he said, no. And that was just a real eye opener for me.
That to me is patriarchy, and that's a lack of analysis of power. That queer people aren't an oppressed class in this church or anywhere is patriarchy. and would that same person say that there's no oppression of women in the United Methodist Church either? I mean, that would be the most ridiculous statement you've even heard, even though there may be no formal discrimination against women.
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably pull up some,
I think that this person might have said
much
that.
less, along race and class lines within our denomination, right? So that's just patriarchal thinking, which is why I think that the denomination probably cannot survive, because the people in power refuse to see that oppression is real.
Right. So like I think we don't have an analysis of oppression because we can't even agree that it exists at a fundamental level. Like, we need to address this. I think that impetus does not even exist.
I think certainly within the powers that be, so to speak, within the hierarchy, both in the connectional table and the Council of Bishops, or anybody who's in any of the institutions, I'd say that despite maybe some personal commitments to the dismantling of oppression, that there is not, despite our language, our speech, and the names of some of our agencies, that commitment. Or that commitment, much less understanding, analysis.
I want to bring something else in as we think about, before we go to the second part of the question also, is that, and this, in addition to this frustration of the sort of thing that Amy was just talking about, of bishops saying, you're not oppressed, it's just you're not oppressed. I also have some sadness around the context of unity, when I know that within our own so-called movement of justice for LGBTQ people within the United Methodist Church, I'm talking about the reconciling movement, I also want to say there's not unity there. And I don't just mean in the sense that, the reconciling convocation. I was realizing recently that if the reconciling convocation a few weeks ago, if they tried to pass an amendment to the Book of Discipline voting within the people who attend convocation, they couldn't have gotten something passed. Like within the people who paid $300 to go and attend like that. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when the Love Your Neighbor Coalition was formed, I guess, how long ago was it now? I mean, over two general conferences ago, because it was in place in Tampa. The idea, I thought at the time, was that this was going to be a solidarity movement among different coalitions, different caucus groups that were going to come together and support each other. And that there's still something called the Love Your Neighbor Coalition, but it is not a coalition of different caucus groups that are working together. And I don't mean, I don't just mean that, the groups other than RMN aren't supporting queer people. I don't even mean that. I mean, there is no common platform. There's no community, to my knowledge. Well, never mind, to my knowledge. I'm trying to be coy there. There isn't. Like, it's not like the Black Methodist for Church Renewal and Reconciling Ministries Network and the Hispanic Caucus and the disabled clergy group got together and said, here are our core commitments. We're going to support these things politically, or we're going to work together. We're all on board with this. We're going to fight for each other. We're going to stand together. No.
They do have that, Will.
What's that?
They actually do have that. At least they did when I was working with them for stop with the face 4 years ago. But the problem was you could opt out. So if an LGBTQ thing came up, then those other groups could say, no, all of our groups don't agree with this, so we're not going to support that.
Well,
there was a common, right, yeah. But the ability to opt out was...
Right. And even just calling this last convocation, I just called it the RMN convocation, but it called itself the Love Your Neighbor Coalition. It's like, really? Is the Hispanic Caucus really putting on this convocation? No, they're not. But there's this love your neighbor, it's this language of, I don't know, allyship or solidarity or progressiveness.
Coalition,
yeah. So even that, I don't know, those are some, I have some thoughts and feelings around unity there also. And I'm not, trying to dump on the people who have been working on this, but I'm just trying to name, not only within the Council of Bishops and within general church context, but also within the coalition. I've also learned that unity means nothing because of the Love Your Neighbor Coalition. We can edit that part out before we. But it's just something I'm thinking also.
Well, it's a hard truth.
Well, part of what made me think, one of the, I listened to online a lot of the convocation, and a real highlight was, and there were several, but one was Jay Williams' Friday night keynote address and or speech. Some people called it a sermon. And I remember him saying, kind of imagining something along the lines of, what if the Reconciling Ministries Network started acting in solidarity with and becoming a part of the movement behind Black Lives Matter? And I thought, wasn't that the whole idea of this Love Your Neighbor coalition, that there was going to be intersectional work being done? And now, 10 years later, it's like, hey, imagine if we didn't, we started working as a coalition. It's very sad.
That's why Love Prevails is not in the coalition.
Yeah. But are we united with people though? Is there unity? No, we're not.
No.
Yeah, I would jump back a little bit to another thing that Julie had talked about in terms of the authority of the bishops and the power and all of that, and how it is that they appeal to the unity aspect of their job description without taking into account the prophetic teaching portion of their job description, which is also present. And it reminds me that unity never comes by itself. It's always in relationship to something else. What are we unified about? What is this particular unity about at this particular juncture? And it would be interesting to me to have somebody do a little timeline kind of thing about what have United Methodists, EUBs, however you want to track that back, ever been unified about. We weren't unified about slavery, which John Wesley was very clear about in his own time.
Right.
So I'm not sure that there really ever has been something that we've been unified about, including the scriptures. John was not a systematic theologian. You can find lots of different stuff about scriptures in his writing alone. So I'm feeling that we need to move on to the second part of the question.
Excellent. And the second part of the question is, so if we're not done with unity, are there other are there other things that we do want to lift up as values? I was going to be really silly and say, are there other buzzwords we just want to drop in there and say, this is our idol, not unity? But as you thought about that, do people have things on this second part of the question? If not,
the value I always go back to is integrity. That's one that kind of comes back up again and again in the work that we do as Love Prevails, to work to be people of integrity and hold that as a value. That's what I resonate with.
Wow.
The equality and justice words are words that come up for me, and they can be as vague and hard to embody as anything else. And still they are the ones that arise.
Okay. Laura, I'd be interested in your talking a little bit more about the integrity, because I'm thinking about folks who are part of the Wesleyan Covenant thingy and the Good News who have an integrity, I think. There's at least a consistency. And so I'm curious about how integrity works in terms of relationships building. What can we work on together if our integrities are leading us into conflict?
What a question that is. I mean, I know for me, integrity is a lot about living my life as my whole self. And I can't always do that with those folks for sure. I have to mull on that a little bit more.
I like the idea of integrity, but it doesn't seem to move us down the track of unity. Um, so it's almost something else, and I'm not sure how to get at that either. So I thank you for raising that. I'm going to have to do some more thinking about it too.
Is there a truth-telling piece to that, Wesley? And about people being able to tell their own truths?
Well, yes, until you're telling your truth tramples over my telling my truth. I mean, it still leaves us caught in an individual kind of thing, whether that's an individual truth-telling about my reality or some integrity that I have around this particular part of life. And there, for me, there needs to be a communal aspect to it that that may go back to my sociology background instead of my psychology background. And I'm not sure just where these things work themselves out.
Amy, were you saying that truth-telling could be one of those values that we as individuals or that Love Prevails brings that somehow resonates with integrity?
I don't know. I think where my head was going is while the opposition can think all kinds of things about me, it feels like many of the things they think about me are in fact not true. And so it's how do you treat people like people and not as groups? In the same way it's every group we demonize, is that we don't say we're going to deal with this person on an individual basis. We're going to tell lies about them, that then diminish their personhood. And I think that at some level we could really get to the core of some of that truth and some of the lies.
Yeah, well, to kind of jump in with just a simpler response to this question of what could be another value, and that we lift up or talk about instead of unity. I was just thinking the golden rule. Remember? Oh, good. And that can be a way of. I mean, I know it's very simple, but. I think that's, I'm just thinking the United Methodist Church right now is so into unity. The other thing is mission, as they're talking about lately, is mission, which is all the same problems as unity and covenant and staying at the table and all those other buzzwords. But you think about like our mission statement and like unity and mission. It's like, what about, the golden rule or love of God and love of neighbor or, what about though? Can't we talk about those things or lift that up as a priority? Don't you? I mean, of course, anything can be whitewashed and made to be, can be put to evil causes. I'm not saying that those words or those formulations are somehow magical or perfect, but they're pretty good. And it does make me wonder, why don't we talk about the golden rule or love of God and love of neighbor as a denomination? Why is that not guiding us? And why is not preaching good news to the poor guiding us? Why is this making disciples, this thing I can quote, which isn't even in the Bible?
It's almost as if we were unified, we wouldn't need to talk about unity. Yes. And talking about unity simply underscores our lack of it, and around we go.
Yeah. I think that's very true.
I do wonder, though, love prevails. Are we ever going to get to, is the United Methodist Church ever going to get to love, or loving others, or loving our neighbor as ourselves? I don't think so. I don't think I don't think it's going to come up. I think it's just too scary. It's too difficult. It's too, and I'm not saying that this will solve all of our problems and all of our issues if we could just love each other and quote the same Bible verses. But I don't know. I'd be interested in trying it, or if the church would. Or obviously, it's not going to happen.
I don't think that's a value for a lot of people. I think
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think leading heart liberals let everybody values the golden rule and fair treatment and equality and justice. And I think that is untrue.
Yeah.
I think let people value laws. Some people value laws and rules. Some people think there is a natural pecking order of humanity, and to mess with that is to upend some kind of created order. I absolutely do not think those are values for people.
Yeah.
So
maybe we should end our time.
Well, I think progressive people need to figure out how to talk to folks for whom that is not a value, because we act like, of course, everybody wants this. And the truth is, they do not. Here ends the good news.
Yeah, good enough. Are there other things we want to share before we sign off and end it?
I want to say that I think a value that we have been learning together as Love Prevails is the value of freedom. And I think I've learned a lot about this from the way Will Green acts and speaks in the context of New England, especially. But that, we are free to act within the context of oppression and make different choices. We are free to disobey. We are free to disrupt. We are free to withdraw. We are free not to disrupt. We are free to tell our truths, disclose. We are free to divest our money from the system. We are free to do any damn thing in the context of right relationships. And I think this gets back to our conversation about civility too, is that when people have perceived us to be uncivil, I perceive myself to be acting freely within the context of relationships. And if people have been unable to approach me to have a conversation about how they perceive my actions, that's their lack of freedom and not mine. I am open to conversations with people, right? And I'm free to have those conversations. I'm actually even not only free, I'm willing to have those conversations. So I just think, I wondered if maybe, I was thinking, is disruption, which Love Prevails is so associated with, disruption, that you think that's our value. And I think that I was like, I just don't even know that that's our value. Like we're willing to do that.
Do it, yes.
Because we feel, and each of us to differing degrees in the context of our actions together feel different levels of freedom, right? On how we do, but as a group, we support one another in whatever level of freedom that we're willing to act within to change the situation. And so we are free, we find ourselves free to disrupt. And I think that's why people admire us but don't want to emulate us to the extent that people support us, is because they see that freedom. And sometimes even, we're working through fear and the fact that we don't feel free to do that sometimes, right? Because it's hard. And it's not like I don't feel fear or feel threatened by what the consequences of my actions might be, but to keep on pushing through that. And I think that that's something that I want to always communicate to people all the time, especially in the denomination, that was that, no, actually, you are free to do anything. And there may or may not be consequences based on the power, privilege, and oppression that's a part of the situation. But we are free to act.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a value that we hold, and not act, free to not act as well, to say this is something that we cannot operate within. And that I hope that when we're not making those choice, that really feels like a choice for us when we're not acting versus like a form of paralysis because we don't know what to do. But no, you know what? Right now we're actually choosing freely not to act within this context of oppression, particularly United Methodist Church. And so I think
Yeah, that's good. I think people have lost their sense of moral agency. So, but they're too afraid of the repercussions, too afraid of the consequences, and therefore think they have no choice. Trying to get people to realize they always have a choice, but all those choices come with different consequences. But people have been so willing to suspend their conscience in all of this that it is no wonder we're in the place we're in, because good people have done nothing.
It's also been more than just good folks not doing anything. There's a whole system and structure that has been pushing us in that kind of direction. And so we no longer have any curricula worth speaking about that connects our spirit with our sexuality. We just don't have it anymore. We did have it back in the 70s and 80s, and then funding bans came in. You can't talk about homosexuality, and if you can't talk about queer lives, and you can't talk about straight lives, and that whole, we've taught ourselves not to engage this particular issue.
To the poverty of countless areas. I mean, it's impoverished us in countless ways.
Well, can you wrap this up, Will?
Thanks, everybody. Say
Well
bye.
done.
See you next time. Bye. Bye. You're all supposed to wave and say bye.
Oh, bye.
Bye. Okay.